The Apache girl whispered. "You saved me once," the rancher promised. "You're safe with me now." The day began like many others on the ranch, quiet, steady, and ruled by routine. The rancher woke before sunrise, as he always did. The sky was still dark, painted with faint stars, and the air carried a cold that settled deep into the bones. He pulled on his boots, stepped outside, and took a slow breath. The land stretched wide and open around him, fields rolling into the distance, fences cutting straight lines across the earth. This land was his life. It asked for hard work, patience, and silence, and in return it gave him purpose. He had lived this way for years, mostly alone. People in nearby towns knew him as a man of few words. He didn't talk much about his past, and no one pushed him to. They knew he was dependable, fair, and strong in a quiet way. He fixed his own fences, tended his animals, and helped neighbors when needed, then returned to his solitude without fuss. His life was simple, and he preferred it that way. That morning, after finishing his chores, he saddled his horse and set out to check the far end of his land. It was an area close to rough terrain, where the land dipped into dry washes and rocky paths. He liked riding there. It reminded him that nature could still be wild and unpredictable. As he rode, the sun slowly rose, spreading warm light over the ground. That was when he noticed something was wrong. Near a narrow path, he saw signs of struggle, scuffed dirt, broken brush, and something dropped on the ground. He slowed his horse and studied the area carefully. Years of working alone had taught him to trust his instincts. Something told him this was not normal. He dismounted and followed the trail on foot. The marks led him toward a small ravine. As he got closer, he heard a faint sound, a soft cry almost lost in the wind. His heart tightened. He moved faster now, careful but urgent. At the bottom of the ravine, he saw her. She was young, small in frame, crouched against the rocky wall as if trying to disappear into it. Her clothes were dusty, her hair tangled, and her eyes wide with fear. She froze when she saw him, pulling her knees closer to her chest. It was clear she had been through something frightening. The rancher stopped several steps away and slowly raised his hands, showing he meant no harm. His voice was calm and low when he spoke, gentle like one might use with a frightened animal. "It's okay," he said. "I'm not here to hurt you." She didn't respond. Her eyes stayed locked on him, searching his face for any sign of danger. He could see she was shaking, not just from fear but from exhaustion. He took a careful step closer. "You're safe now," he said softly. "No one's going to touch you." Those words seemed to reach her. Her breathing slowed slightly, though she still didn't move. After a long moment, she whispered something in a language he didn't understand. The sound of it was fragile, like it might break if spoken too loudly. He knelt down to be at her level, keeping enough distance so she wouldn't feel trapped. He offered her his water bottle, setting it on the ground between them. "Take it," he said. "You need it." After a pause that felt endless, she reached for it with trembling hands and took a small sip. Then another. Tears filled her eyes and she looked away, embarrassed by her weakness. The rancher felt a deep anger rise inside him, not toward her but toward whatever had caused this fear. He didn't ask questions. He knew now was not the time. All that mattered was getting her somewhere safe. He stood slowly and extended his hand, not too close. "Come with me," he said. "I'll help you." She hesitated, then finally nodded. With effort she stood. Her legs were unsteady and she stumbled. Instinctively he stepped forward to steady her, then stopped himself, remembering not to frighten her. Instead he let her lean against his arm, offering support without force. The walk back to the horse was slow. She glanced around constantly, flinching at sudden sounds. He stayed alert, scanning the area, ready to protect if needed. When they reached the horse, she froze again, clearly unsure. "It's all right," he assured her. "He won't hurt you." With patience, he helped her mount, then climbed up behind her, careful to keep his movements controlled and respectful. As they rode back toward the ranch, the tension in her body slowly eased. She didn't speak, but she no longer trembled as badly. At the ranch house, he brought her inside and gave her a blanket. He set her near the table and placed food in front of her, simple, warm, filling. She ate quietly, carefully, as if afraid it might disappear. When she finally looked up at him, her eyes were filled with something new, gratitude mixed with disbelief. She spoke again, this time in broken English. "Thank you," she whispered. He nodded. "You don't have to thank me." He contacted people who could help her properly, those who knew her community, her language, her world. When they arrived later that day, she stood reluctantly, clearly not wanting to leave yet. Before going, she turned back to the rancher. She didn't say much, just looked at him as if memorizing his face. Then she left. The ranch grew quiet again. The rancher returned to his routine, but something had changed. The silence felt heavier now. He found himself thinking about her, wondering if she was safe, if she was healing. He told himself it was just another day, another act of help, but deep down he knew it was. Because somewhere in the distance, a young girl carried the memory of a man who stood between her and fear, and that moment would echo far beyond that day. Time moved forward, steady and quiet, just like the land around the ranch. Days turned into weeks, and weeks slowly became years. The rancher went back to his usual routine. He woke before sunrise, worked until the sky turned orange at dusk, and rested when night finally settled over the fields. To anyone watching from the outside, his life looked unchanged. The fences were repaired, the animals were healthy, and the land was cared for with the same steady hands as always. But inside him, something was different. Every now and then, small moments pulled his thoughts back to that day. A shadow near the ravine, a sudden sound carried by the wind, a young voice, trembling but thankful. He never spoke about it to anyone. There was no need. He believed some moments were meant to be carried quietly, not shared. He often wondered what had become of the girl. He hoped she was safe. He hoped she had found people who treated her with care and respect. Sometimes late at night, when the house was silent and the only sound was the wind brushing against the walls, he thought about whether his actions had truly made a difference. He told himself he had simply done what was right, nothing more. Life on the ranch did not slow down for memories. Seasons changed. The cold months came and went, followed by long summers where the sun burned high and strong. The rancher aged a little with each year, more lines on his face, more weight in his shoulders, but his strength remained. He helped neighbors when storms damaged their property. He fixed roads after floods. He never asked for praise. Far away from the ranch, the girl was growing too. She was no longer the frightened child crouched in the ravine. She grew taller, stronger, and quieter. Her life had not been easy. There were moments when fear returned, when the world felt unkind and uncertain. But through it all, she held on to one clear memory: a man standing calmly, offering water, a voice saying she was safe. That memory became her anchor. When things felt overwhelming, she reminded herself that kindness existed, that there were people who would protect without expecting anything in return. She learned to stand straighter, to speak when needed, and to trust her instincts. She did not forget where she came from, and she did not forget who helped her when she needed it most. Years later, circumstances led her back toward the region she once fled from. She did not plan it at first. It began as a simple decision: work that needed to be done, people she needed to help, responsibilities she could no longer ignore. The closer she got, the heavier her chest felt. Memories rose up without warning, vivid and sharp. She wondered if the rancher still lived there. She told herself it didn't matter. She wasn't returning to look for him. She was returning because life demanded it. Still, her heart beat faster with every mile. The rancher noticed changes too, though he didn't understand why at first. He found himself more alert, more aware of the land around him. It was as if the past was slowly circling back, though he couldn't yet see it clearly. He felt a strange sense of anticipation mixed with caution, like the calm before a storm. One afternoon, while riding near the edge of his land, he saw someone walking along the road. It wasn't unusual, but something about her made him slow his horse. She walked with purpose, her head held high, but there was a quiet strength in her posture that caught his attention. As he drew closer, she looked up. Their eyes met. For a brief moment, neither of them moved. Time seemed to pause, stretching thin between them. Recognition did not come instantly. Instead, it crept in slowly, carried by memory rather than logic. The rancher frowned slightly, studying her face. Something about her eyes felt familiar. The shape of her expression stirred something deep inside him. He dismounted more out of instinct than thought. She took a hesitant step forward. Her voice was steady but soft. "You don't remember me," she said. He searched her face again, and then it struck him. Not the details, but the feeling, the fear he once saw. The strength that followed. "The ravine," he said quietly. She nodded. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. There was no need for dramatic words. The truth sat plainly between them. She had not imagined that day. He had not forgotten it. "You saved me once," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. He shook his head gently. "I helped," he replied. "Anyone would have." She looked at him then, really looked at him. Not everyone would. They stood there, two lives intersecting again after years apart. The rancher felt a deep sense of humility. He had never considered himself important in her story. Hearing her words forced him to see that his actions had carried weight far beyond that single day. They spoke briefly, carefully, like two people walking across fragile ground. She told him she was back temporarily, that she had worked nearby. He told her the ranch was still the same, still standing. Before they parted, he said something that surprised even him. "If you need anything, you know where I am." She smiled, a small but genuine smile. "I do." As she walked away, the rancher remained still, watching until she disappeared from view. The land felt different now, alive in a way it hadn't for years. He realized then that some moments are not meant to stay in the past. Some return, asking to be understood more deeply. That night, as the stars filled the sky, both of them lay awake in separate places, thinking about the same truth. The world had brought them back together for a reason. Neither knew what would come next, but both felt it clearly. The promise of safety had not faded with time. The days after their meeting passed slowly, but neither of them could ignore what had been stirred. The rancher tried to return to his routine, yet his thoughts kept drifting back to her face, her voice, and the way she had said those words. He had helped many people in his life, but no one had ever returned years later to remind him that a single moment could last a lifetime. He told himself not to read too much into it. Life had taught him to be careful with expectations. Still, something had changed. The land felt quieter than usual, and the evenings seemed longer. He found himself watching the road more often, half expecting to see her walking toward the ranch again. She, too, was restless. Though she stayed in a small place near the edge of town, her thoughts kept pulling her back to the ranch. Seeing him again had reopened memories she thought were settled. But this time, those memories did not bring fear. They brought a strange calm, mixed with questions she had never allowed herself to ask before. Why had fate brought them back together now? She decided not to overthink it. One afternoon, she gathered her courage and went to the ranch. She didn't know what she would say. She only knew that silence felt heavier than risk. When the rancher saw her approaching, he felt his chest tighten. He walked toward her, wiping his hands on his jeans, unsure why he suddenly felt nervous. "I hope it's okay I came," she said. "It's fine," he replied. "You're always welcome here." Those words surprised both of them. He hadn't planned to say them, but they felt true. They sat outside near the fence, the wide land stretching endlessly before them. At first they spoke about small things, the weather, the road conditions, the changes in town. But slowly, the conversation deepened. She told him about the work she was doing, about helping others find stability and direction. He listened carefully, impressed by her strength and determination. "You've come a long way," he said. She smiled softly. "I had good reasons to." There was a pause, then she looked at him with seriousness. "That day, you don't know what it meant to me." He met her gaze, not turning away this time. "I didn't know you were in danger until I saw you," he said. "I just did what felt right," she nodded. "Sometimes that's enough to change everything." Over the next few days, she visited the ranch more often. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes they worked in silence, fixing fences or checking the land. The rancher found comfort in her presence. She brought life into the quiet spaces he had grown used to. One evening, as the sun dipped low, casting golden light across the fields, she grew quiet. He noticed and waited, giving her space. "I used to think safety was a place," she finally said. "Now I know it's a person, or maybe a feeling." He didn't respond right away. He felt the weight of her words and the responsibility they carried. "I can't promise the world won't be hard," he said carefully, "but I can promise honesty." She looked at him, eyes steady. "That's enough." But life rarely allows peace to remain untouched. Trouble began quietly, like distant thunder. Old tensions resurfaced around her work. Misunderstandings grew, fueled by fear and resistance. She tried to handle it on her own, unwilling to involve the rancher. She didn't want to burden him. He sensed something was wrong. She was quieter, distracted. One night, after noticing her distress, he spoke gently. "You don't have to face things alone." She hesitated, then finally opened up. She explained the pressure she was under, the way certain people questioned her intentions and made her feel unwelcome. The rancher listened, jaw tight. "You're doing good work," he said firmly. "You don't deserve that." The next days tested both of them. The rancher stood beside her, not by force but by presence. He helped her think clearly, plan calmly, and stay grounded. She found strength in knowing he believed her. For the first time, she wasn't running from fear. She was facing it. One evening she whispered, "I'm not that scared girl anymore." He nodded. "I know." As the situation began to settle, they stood together under the stars. The land felt peaceful again. Whatever lay ahead, one truth was clear. Their lives were no longer separate paths. They had crossed again, and this time, neither intended to walk away. The trouble did not arrive suddenly. It came slowly, quietly, like a shadow growing longer at the end of the day. At first it was small things, unfriendly looks, cold words, doors that once opened easily now closing without explanation. She noticed it right away, even though she tried not to show it. Years of experience had taught her to read the space around people, to sense when the air changed. The rancher noticed too. He saw it in the way she paused before speaking, in how her shoulders tightened when certain names were mentioned. She smiled less, laughed more softly. Though she still came to the ranch, her visits felt heavier, as if she was carrying an invisible weight. One afternoon, as they worked together fixing a fence, he finally spoke. "Something's bothering you," he said gently. "I can see it." She kept her eyes on the wire she was tying, her hands steady even though her heart was. "It's nothing I can't handle," she replied. He didn't push. He had learned long ago that trust grew best when given space. Still, he stayed close, not hovering, just present. And that presence mattered more than words. The pressure around her work increased. People questioned her motives. Some misunderstood her intentions. Others resisted change simply because it made them uncomfortable. None of it was loud or dramatic, but it wore her down. Each day required more strength than the last. There were nights she lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if she was strong enough to keep going. Doubt crept in quietly, whispering old fears she thought she had left behind. She reminded herself of how far she had come. She reminded herself of the girl in the ravine, and the woman she had become since then. Still, some days were harder than others. One evening, after a long and difficult day, she arrived at the ranch later than usual. The sun was already low, painting the sky in deep shades of orange and purple. The rancher saw her truck pull in and knew immediately that something was wrong. She stepped out slowly, exhaustion written across her face. This time, she didn't try to hide it. They sat on the porch in silence for a while, the sound of insects filling the air. Finally, she spoke. "I didn't think it would feel like this," she said. "I thought doing the right thing would be enough." He nodded, eyes fixed on the horizon. "Doing the right thing doesn't always make things easier," he said, "but it makes them meaningful." She let out a slow breath. "Sometimes I feel like I'm standing alone again." He turned to her then, his voice calm but firm. "You're not." Those simple words settled something deep inside her. She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the same steady strength that had once guided her out of fear. Not loud, not forceful, just unwavering. From that moment on, he stood beside her more openly. He didn't speak for her or take control. He didn't step in unless she asked. But when she needed support, he was there, listening, advising, grounding her when emotions threatened to pull her under. Together, they faced the tension with patience. She spoke clearly and honestly when questions were raised. He helped her prepare, reminding her to stay calm and focused. They worked through each challenge step by step, never rushing, never reacting out of fear. Slowly, things began to change. Some people started to listen. Others softened when they saw her consistency and integrity. The resistance didn't disappear completely, but it lost its power. What once felt overwhelming now felt manageable. Through it all, she grew stronger. One afternoon, as they walked the edge of the ranch, she stopped and looked out over the land. "I used to think strength meant standing alone," she said. "Now I know it can also mean knowing when to accept support." He smiled slightly. "Strength takes many forms." The bond between them deepened, not through dramatic moments but through shared time and trust. They talked more openly now, about the past, about choices, about regrets and hopes. He shared parts of his life he rarely spoke about. She listened without judgment, understanding that silence had once been his shield. There were moments of laughter too, simple, unexpected ones that reminded them both that life could still be light. As the situation around her work finally settled, she felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in a long time. Not because everything was perfect, but because she no longer felt alone in facing it. One night, under a sky full of stars, she spoke softly. "You know, you saved me again." He shook his head gently. "No," he said, "you did that yourself, I just stood with you." She smiled, knowing the truth lived somewhere between those words. The storm had passed, but its lessons remained. Safety, she realized, wasn't about being protected from every hardship. It was about having someone who believed in you when the world felt uncertain. And as they sat there together, the quiet land around them, both understood that whatever came next, they would face it with the same steady courage, side by side. The land felt calmer after everything had passed. The tension that once hung in the air slowly faded, replaced by long stretches of quiet days and gentle evenings. The ranch returned to its steady rhythm, and this time she was part of it in a way that felt natural, not forced. She no longer arrived carrying fear in her chest. When she came down the dirt road, her shoulders were relaxed, her steps sure. The rancher noticed the change right away. He had watched her grow stronger over time, but now there was something else: peace. They spent their days working side by side. There was no need to fill every moment with conversation. Silence between them felt comfortable, even meaningful. Sometimes they spoke about small things, the weather, the animals, plans for the next week. Other times they shared deeper thoughts, slowly and honestly, without pressure. One afternoon, as they repaired an old section of fence together, she stopped and looked around. The field stretched wide under the open sky, sunlight moving softly across the grass. "This place feels different now," she said. He tightened the wire and nodded. "It hasn't changed much," she smiled. "I have." He glanced at her, then returned her smile. "That's true." Later that evening, they sat outside as the sun dipped below the horizon. The sky turned warm shades of gold and purple, and the air cooled just enough to be comforting. She pulled her jacket closer and took a slow breath. For a long time, she said, I thought safety meant being far away from anything that reminded me of fear. I kept moving, thinking distance would protect me. He listened quietly, letting her find her words. But now, she continued, I know safety can also mean standing still, facing things instead of running. He nodded, understanding more than he could put into words. As the weeks passed, her work in the area came to a close. The challenges that once surrounded her were resolved. She had done what she came to do, and she had done it with integrity. People saw her differently now, not as someone to question, but as someone to respect. Still, the thought of leaving weighed on her. One morning, as she helped the rancher prepare feed, she hesitated before speaking. I'll be heading out soon, she said quietly. He paused, then nodded. I figured. Neither of them spoke for a moment. The truth of it settled between them. I don't know where I'll go next, she added, but I know I won't be the same person I was before I came back. He looked at her then, his expression steady. That's how life should be, he said. Each place leaves its mark. That night she couldn't sleep. Memories played through her mind. The ravine, the years between, the reunion, the storm they faced together. And then there was the promise, spoken once long ago and felt again now. Before sunrise, she walked outside and stood beneath the quiet sky. She realized something important in that moment. Safety wasn't just something he gave her. It was something she had learned to build within herself, with the help of someone who believed in her when she needed it most. Later that day, she found him near the barn. I wanted to thank you, she said. He frowned slightly. For what? For keeping your promise, she replied. He looked at her surprised. You said I was safe, she continued. And you meant it, not by controlling anything, not by fixing everything, but by standing with me. He took a slow breath. I meant every word, she smiled, eyes shining. I know. When the day came for her to leave, the goodbye was quiet. There were no long speeches, no dramatic gestures. Just two people standing at the edge of a road, knowing that something meaningful had passed between them. You'll always have a place here, he said simply. She nodded. And you'll always be part of my story. As she drove away, the rancher stood watching until the road was empty again. The land felt quiet, but not lonely. He returned to his work with a sense of completion he hadn't known before. Far down the road, she glanced in the mirror one last time. The ranch disappeared from view, but its impact remained. She carried it with her in her strength, her calm, her confidence. Years later, she would speak of that place not as a shelter, but as a turning point. A place where fear lost its power. A place where a promise was kept. And the rancher would continue his life as he always had, steady, quiet, grounded. But now, when the wind moved across the fields and the sun dipped low in the sky, he knew something had changed. Once, he had saved a frightened girl. Now he knew he had witnessed the rise of a strong woman. And that, he understood, was the greatest reward of all.